The stars look different out here, Captain Jake Morrison thought as he stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty. They were brighter, cleaner, untouched by the light pollution of Earth's sprawling cities. His crew had been traveling for 8 months now, pushing deeper into space than any human had ever gone before. Their mission was simple: find a suitable planet for humanity's first deep space colony and establish a foothold among the stars. Jake watched his tactical officer Lisa Grant check her instruments for the 100th time that day. She was nervous, though she tried to hide it behind her usual professional demeanor. They all were nervous. This far from Earth, they were truly alone. No backup, no rescue ships, no way home except the path they had carved through the void themselves. "Captain, we're approaching the coordinates," announced Ben Carter from the engineering station. The chief engineer had been with Jake for 5 years, and his steady voice was always reassuring during tense moments. "All systems are green. We should reach the target system in about 6 hours. Jake nodded and settled into his command chair. The target system had 3 potentially habitable planets according to their long-range scans. If even one of them proved suitable, it would change everything for humanity. No longer would they be confined to their small corner of the galaxy, dependent on the resources of a single star system. The bridge fell into a comfortable routine as they approached their destination. Lisa monitored for any signs of life or artificial signals, while Ben kept their engines running smoothly. The rest of the crew, 32 men and women who had volunteered for this dangerous journey, went about their duties with quiet determination. That's when everything changed. The first sign of trouble came from Lisa's station. Her instruments began picking up something massive on their sensors, something that definitely wasn't a planet or asteroid. "Captain," she said, her voice tight with concern, "I'm reading multiple contacts ahead of us. They're big and they're moving in formation." Jake felt his stomach drop. In all their planning for this mission, they had considered the possibility of encountering alien life. But the galaxy seemed so vast and empty that most scientists believed the chances were minimal. Now faced with the reality of contact, he realized how unprepared they really were. "Can you identify them?" Jake asked, trying to keep his voice calm for the sake of his crew. "Negative, sir. The signatures don't match anything in our database. But Captain, they're heading straight for us." Ben looked up from his console. "Should I prepare evasive maneuvers?" Before Jake could answer, their communications array crackled to life. The voice that emerged spoke perfect English, though there was something cold and mechanical about it that made Jake's skin crawl. "Unknown vessel. You have violated the territorial boundaries of the Zephyrian Empire. Reduce speed and prepare to be boarded. Any attempt to flee or resist will result in your immediate destruction." The bridge fell silent except for the quiet hum of the ship's systems. Jake had trained for many scenarios, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. First contact with an alien species, and it was happening at gunpoint. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Liberty," he responded, hoping diplomacy might work where force clearly wouldn't. "We mean no harm. We're explorers from Earth, seeking new worlds for peaceful colonization. We weren't aware this region was claimed by anyone." The response came quickly, and it wasn't encouraging. "Your ignorance is not our concern, human. You will comply with our instructions or be destroyed. This is your only warning." Lisa's hands flew over her controls. "Captain, I count 12 ships. They're each at least 3 times our size, and their energy signatures are off the charts. If they wanted to destroy us, we wouldn't stand a chance." Jake weighed his options. The Liberty was a tough ship, built for long-range exploration and equipped with the best weapons Earth could provide. But against 12 ships of superior technology, resistance would be suicide. His duty was to his crew and to humanity. He had to find a way to survive this encounter and bring word back to Earth. "Stand down weapons and reduce speed," Jake ordered. "Lisa, open a channel to Earth Command. Send everything we have on these aliens. If we don't make it back, at least Earth will know what's out here." The next few hours passed in tense silence as the Zephyrian ships surrounded the Liberty. Jake got his first look at the aliens when they materialized on his bridge in columns of blue light. They were tall, nearly 8 feet in height, with pale gray skin and large black eyes that seemed to look right through him. Their leader wore elaborate robes covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. "I am High Regent Vextar of the Zephyrian Empire," the alien announced, his voice carrying an authority that had been earned over centuries of absolute power. "Your species has made a grave error in venturing into our domain." Jake stood to face the alien leader, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. We had no knowledge of your empire or your territorial claims. Surely we can work out some kind of understanding. Vexitar studied Jake with those unsettling black eyes. Understanding? Your species has existed for mere thousands of years. You have been capable of interstellar travel for less than a century. We have ruled this sector of the galaxy for over 3 millennia, long before your primitive ancestors learned to use fire. The alien leader gestured dismissively. We have watched your kind with interest and growing concern. You are violent, unpredictable, and expansionist by nature. Already you have turned your own world into a polluted wasteland through warfare and greed. We cannot allow such a destructive species to spread among the stars. Jake felt anger rising in his chest, but he forced himself to remain calm. You judge us harshly based on limited observation. Humanity has made mistakes, yes, but we've also shown the capacity for growth, for peace, for greatness. We've overcome our worst instincts and reached for the stars. Words, Vextar said with what might have been a smile on his alien features. Your actions speak louder. Even now your homeworld prepares for wars over resources and territory. You bring your conflicts with you wherever you go. The High Regent began pacing around the bridge, examining the human technology with obvious disdain. However, we are not without mercy. The Zephyrian Empire offers your species a choice. Return to your home system immediately and remain there. Accept our guidance and protection, and humanity may continue to exist as a client species under our benevolent rule. Jake couldn't believe what he was hearing. You want us to abandon our dreams of exploring the galaxy? To confine ourselves to a single star system forever? The alternative, Vextar continued as if Jake hadn't spoken, is total annihilation. We have removed 37 species from this galaxy who refused our generous offer. Their worlds are now empty monuments to the folly of defying the Zephyrian Empire. The bridge was deadly quiet as the implications sank in. Lisa looked pale at her station, while Ben's hands were clenched into fists. Jake could see the same mixture of fear and anger on every face around him. You have 10 of your solar cycles to decide, Vextar announced. Remove all human presence from beyond your home system, or we will do it for you. Permanently. With that, the aliens vanished in the same blue light that had brought them, leaving the human crew alone with their thoughts and their impossible choice. Jake slumped into his command chair, feeling the weight of his species' future pressing down on him. Set course for Earth, he ordered quietly. Maximum speed. We need to get home and warn everyone about what's coming. As the Liberty turned toward the distant light of Sol, Jake stared out at the stars that no longer seemed so welcoming. Somewhere out there, an ancient empire waited to judge humanity's response to their ultimatum. The next few months would determine whether mankind's greatest adventure had just come to an end, before it had truly begun. The emergency session of the United Earth Council had been going for 6 hours, and President Amy Rodriguez could feel the weight of every word spoken in the chamber. Captain Jake Morrison stood at the center podium, his uniform still bearing the creases from months in space, as he delivered his report for the 3rd time to yet another group of military advisors and government officials. The Zephyrian ships were unlike anything we've ever seen, Jake repeated, his voice steady despite the exhaustion in his eyes. Their technology is centuries ahead of ours, maybe more. High Regent Vextar made it clear that resistance would mean the complete destruction of humanity. Defense Minister Carl Thompson leaned forward in his chair, his weathered face grim. You're certain they said 37 species? They've actually wiped out 37 civilizations. That's what he claimed, sir. And given the size and power of their fleet, I believe him. Jake's hands clenched slightly as he spoke. We're not dealing with a bluff or empty threats. These beings have been ruling this part of the galaxy since before human civilization began. President Rodriguez studied the holographic display that showed the estimated size and scope of the Zephyrian Empire based on Jake's observations. The red zone stretched across hundreds of star systems, dwarfing humanity's small presence in the galaxy. 10 solar cycles, she murmured. Less than 11 Earth years to abandon everything we've worked toward. Dr. Helen Price, the lead xenobiologist who had been analyzing every scrap of data from the Liberty's encounter, cleared her throat. Madam President, if I may, there's something about the Zephyrians that's been bothering me since I reviewed Captain Morrison's recordings. All eyes turned to the elderly scientist. She had spent her entire career studying the possibility of alien life, and now that it had finally been found, her expertise was more valuable than gold. Their technology, while clearly superior to ours, shows signs of age. Not where exactly, but stagnation. Carl frowned. Explain what you mean, Doctor. The ship designs Captain Morrison observed appear to be centuries old, possibly unchanged for millennia. The weapons, the propulsion systems, even their communication methods all suggest a civilization that reached a technological peak long ago and has remained there ever since. Dr. Price activated her own display, showing detailed scans of the Zephyrian vessels. This is either remarkable stability or dangerous complacency. Jake nodded slowly. Now that you mention it, High Regent Vextar did seem surprised that we had achieved interstellar travel so quickly. He acted like our progress was somehow unexpected or unusual. President Rodriguez felt the first stirrings of an idea, but she pushed it down for now. What are our options, realistically speaking? We could comply, Carl said, though his tone suggested he found the idea distasteful. Retreat to the Sol system, accept their terms, hope they honor their word about letting us survive as a client species. That's not survival, Jake said firmly. That's slow extinction. Species that stop growing, stop exploring, stop reaching for something better than themselves. They wither and die eventually. The alternative is open war with a superior force, Carl countered. Our entire fleet wouldn't last 5 minutes against what Captain Morrison described. Our current fleet, yes, Dr. Price said quietly. But what if we had time to prepare? Time to learn from what we observed, to develop new technologies, new strategies? The room fell silent as everyone considered the implications. President Rodriguez looked around the table at the faces of Earth's leadership. These were good people, brave people, but she could see the doubt in their eyes. The Zephyrians had ruled for 3,000 years. How could humanity, barely a century into space travel, possibly stand against such power? That night, President Rodriguez called a much smaller meeting in her private office. Only 5 people attended. Herself, Carl Thompson, Dr. Price, Jake Morrison, and Commander Ryan Kelly, the head of Earth's Special Operations Forces. Ryan was a quiet man with sharp eyes who had spent his career in the shadows, doing the jobs that couldn't be done in the light of day. I want to discuss something that never happened in this room, the president began. A third option that we can't risk becoming public knowledge. Ryan leaned forward, immediately understanding. You're talking about deception? Exactly. We publicly comply with the Zephyrian demands while secretly preparing for war. Use the time they've given us to level the playing field. Carl shook his head. Amy, the risks are enormous. If they discover what we're doing before we're ready, they'll wipe us out without hesitation. And if we don't try, we'll die slowly under their rule anyway, Jake said. At least this way we have a chance. Dr. Price pulled out a tablet and began calling up files. I've been studying everything we know about the Zephyrian Empire. Their surveillance methods seem surprisingly primitive for such an advanced civilization. They rely heavily on passive sensors and periodic patrols rather than constant monitoring. That suggests overconfidence, Ryan noted. They don't expect resistance from species they've already conquered or intimidated. President Rodriguez made her decision. Commander Kelly, I'm authorizing Operation Phantom. You'll have unlimited resources and complete autonomy to prepare humanity for war. Officially, you don't exist. Unofficially, you're our only hope. The next few months saw a transformation unlike anything in human history. While Earth's government publicly announced compliance with Zephyrian demands and began the visible process of recalling exploration vessels, Commander Kelly's shadow operation went into overdrive. Hidden bases began construction throughout the asteroid belt, carved into rocks that looked like any other debris from space. The outer planets became staging areas for secret weapons development. Jupiter's moons housed massive manufacturing facilities, while Saturn's rings concealed entire fleets under construction. Chief Technology Officer Nina Brooks worked 18-hour days reverse engineering every piece of Zephyrian technology they had managed to scan during the encounter. Her teams made breakthrough after breakthrough, not by copying alien designs but by understanding the principles behind them and improving upon them with human innovation. The Zephyrians have better materials and more efficient power sources, Nina explained during one of her rare progress reports. But their actual application of these advantages is surprisingly conservative. It's like they learned to build ships one way thousands of years ago and never bothered to innovate beyond that point. Meanwhile, diplomat Eric Shaw maintained regular contact with the Zephyrian Empire, playing his role as the submissive representative of a defeated species. The aliens had stationed a small monitoring force at the edge of the Sol system, but true to Dr. Price's analysis, their surveillance was sporadic and overconfident. They barely scanned beyond the inner planets, Eric reported. As long as we maintain normal traffic patterns around Earth and Mars, they seem satisfied that we're complying with their demands. Ryan's forces used this blind spot ruthlessly. Asteroid mining operations that appeared routine were actually excavating vast underground complexes. Cargo ships that seemed to be carrying supplies to Mars were actually ferrying weapons and personnel to secret bases throughout the system. The deception required incredible coordination. Every civilian had to be carefully screened before being brought into the operation. Families were separated as loved ones volunteered for assignments they couldn't discuss. The psychological strain was enormous, but humanity endured it because the alternative was unthinkable. Dr. Price made another crucial discovery during this period. By analyzing the communication patterns of the Zephyrian monitoring force, she realized that their language and technology showed clear signs of being inherited rather than developed. They're using systems they don't fully understand, she told the Secret Council. That's why they haven't innovated. They can't. As the months passed and the 10-cycle deadline approached, humanity's secret preparations reached a fever pitch. Hidden shipyards worked around the clock. New weapons based on improved human technology were tested in the depths of space beyond Neptune. Volunteer crews trained for battles they prayed they would win. The Zephyrians remained oblivious to the storm gathering in the system they thought they had pacified. They saw a defeated species retreating to its home world, exactly as 37 others had done before. They had no way of knowing that humanity had chosen a different path, one that would soon shake the foundations of their ancient empire. President Rodriguez stood on the observation deck of the secret command station hidden within Luna's mass, watching the final preparations through reinforced viewing ports. In just a few weeks, the Zephyrian enforcement fleet would arrive to finalize humanity's subjugation. Instead, they would find a trap 3 years in the making, and a species that refused to go quietly into the dark. The Zephyrian enforcement fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, with all the confidence of predators approaching helpless prey. High Regent Vextar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the scanner displays show the expected signs of human submission. Traffic between Earth and Mars moved in predictable patterns, and the outer planets appeared quiet and lifeless. Just as the others, Vextar remarked to his second-in-command. They always choose survival over pride in the end. Deploy standard enforcement formation. We'll make this quick and return to more important matters. The High Regent had brought only a fraction of the Empire's available forces, 12 ships, the same number that had initially encountered the human exploration vessel 3 years ago, more than enough to finalize the subjugation of a single system species that had already accepted defeat. Captain Jake Morrison watched the Zephyrian fleet advance from the bridge of his new command, the UES Defiance. The massive dreadnought was humanity's greatest achievement, built in secret within the hollowed-out remains of asteroid Ceres. Every system, every weapon, every piece of armor had been designed with one purpose: to prove that humans could stand against the galaxy's ancient rulers. All stations report ready. Captain, Lisa Grant announced from her position at Tactical. She had volunteered to follow Jake to his new command, and her familiar presence helped steady his nerves as they prepared for the most important battle in human history. Signal from Admiral Hughes. Ben Carter reported from his engineering station. All hidden platforms are online and awaiting your order. Jake nodded, feeling the weight of 3 years of preparation settling on his shoulders. Admiral Kate Hughes commanded the defensive network from her hidden base within Luna's mass, coordinating a web of weapons platforms and defensive systems that the Zephyrians couldn't even imagine existed. Wait for it, Jake whispered, watching as the alien fleet moved deeper into the Sol system. Let them get comfortable. High Regent Vextar was reviewing the final subjugation protocols when his sensor operator called out in confusion. Sir, I'm detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system. They appear to be powering up simultaneously. Before Vextar could respond, space around his fleet exploded into deadly light. Hidden weapons platforms emerged from what had appeared to be ordinary asteroids, their guns already charged and targeting the Zephyrian ships. The outer planets blazed with activity as secret bases revealed themselves, launching clouds of fighters and small attack craft. Impossible, Vextar breathed. watching his tactical display fill with red enemy contacts. The humans accepted our terms. They submitted. The answer came in the form of Jake Morrison's voice broadcast across all frequencies. Hi, Regent Vextar. This is Captain Morrison of the United Earth Defense Force. You offered us a choice between submission and destruction. We choose neither. We choose freedom. The first salvo from the hidden platform struck the Zephyrian fleet like a hammer blow. Alien shields designed to deflect the primitive weapons they expected humans to possess sparked and failed under the concentrated fire of humanity's improved technology. 2 Zephyrian destroyers exploded in brilliant flashes, their ancient hulls unable to withstand weapons they had never encountered before. Return fire, Vextar screamed, his composure finally cracking. Destroy them all. But the Zephyrian response was sluggish and confused. Their crews, accustomed to fighting inferior opponents or no opponents at all, struggled to adapt to the chaotic battle erupting around them. Centuries of easy victories had made them predictable and slow to react. Jake brought the UES Defiance into the fight with all the fury of a species fighting for its survival. The human dreadnought's guns tore through a Zephyrian cruiser's armor like paper, sending debris spinning into the void. Target their command ship, Jake ordered. If we can take down Vextar, the others might break. Lieutenant Colonel Steve Parker led the first boarding action in human history against an alien vessel. His Marines used their smaller size and superior mobility to navigate the cramped corridors of a damaged Zephyrian destroyer, their weapons designed specifically to penetrate alien armor based on intelligence gathered during the first encounter. These aliens fight like they're reading from a manual, Steve reported over the comm as his team secured the alien bridge. No improvisation, no adaptation. They do the same thing over and over even when it's not working. The battle raged across the entire Sol system as humanity's true strength revealed itself. Ships emerged from behind Jupiter's moons, their crews trained for this moment through countless simulations. The asteroid belt became a maze of crossfire as hidden bases opened up on the confused Zephyrian fleet. Admiral Hughes coordinated the defense with the precision of a master strategist. Her voice remained calm over the command network as she directed the flow of battle, exploiting every weakness in the enemy formation. Formation Delta 7, focus fire on the damaged cruiser. Charlie Squadron, swing around and hit them from below while they're distracted. Dr. Helen Price watched the battle from her position aboard the command station, her teams monitoring every aspect of Zephyrian technology and tactics. Admiral, their communication systems are based on predictable frequency patterns. We can jam them selectively to isolate individual ships from their fleet coordination. The electronic warfare that followed was devastating to the Zephyrian fleet. Cut off from their command structure, individual ships began making tactical errors that human forces exploited ruthlessly. The aliens' rigid military doctrine, effective against lesser opponents, became a liability when facing humans who adapted and improvised with every passing moment. High Regent Vextar found himself trapped in a nightmare beyond his comprehension. The primitive species he had come to subjugate was not only resisting but winning. His flagship's shields failed under sustained bombardment from multiple human vessels, and damage reports flooded in from all over his fleet, sir. We've lost 7 ships, his tactical officer reported, his voice trembling. The humans are using weapons and tactics we've never encountered. Our standard defensive protocols are ineffective. Vextar stared at the tactical display in disbelief. In 3,000 years of Zephyrian dominance, nothing like this had ever happened. Species either submitted immediately or died quickly under the Empire's overwhelming force. They didn't fight back with superior technology and innovative tactics. How is this possible? He demanded. Our intelligence showed them to be a primitive, recently spacefaring species. The answer came as the UES Defiance closed in on the Eternal Dominion, its guns blazing. Jake Morrison's face appeared on Vextar's main screen, and the human captain's expression was grim but determined. You made the same mistake every bully makes, Jake said. You assumed that because we were smaller and younger, we were also weaker and stupider. You gave us 3 years to prepare, and we used every day of it to prove you wrong. The boarding pods that latched onto the Eternal Dominion's hull carried the most elite soldiers humanity had to offer. Steve Parker led them through the alien corridors with tactical brilliance, exploiting every flaw in Zephyrian ship design that 3 years of study had revealed. Vextar made his final stand on the bridge of his flagship, surrounded by the last of his loyal guards. When the human Marines breached the command center, he faced them with a mixture of pride and terror that had been building for 3 millennia. "You cannot do this," he gasped as Steve Parker's weapon aimed at his chest. "The Zephyrian Empire has ruled for thousands of years. We are your superiors in every way." Steve looked at the alien leader with something approaching pity. "Maybe you were superior once, but you stopped growing, stopped learning, stopped trying to be better. That's when you stopped being superior and started being just another obstacle for humanity to overcome." The High Regent's death marked the end of the battle and the beginning of something unprecedented in galactic history. Of the 12 ships that had entered the Sol system, only 3 limped away into hyperspace, carrying news of the impossible defeat back to the heart of the Zephyrian Empire. Jake stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, surrounded by the debris of alien ships and the glow of human victory. Around him, his crew worked to secure the battlefield and care for their wounded, but he could see something new in their eyes. For the first time in human history, they had faced the galaxy's established powers and won. "Admiral Hughes to all ships," came the voice over the comm. "Preliminary casualty reports show minimal losses on our side. The Sol system remains under human control." But Jake knew this was only the beginning. Somewhere in the depths of space, the Zephyrian Empire was learning that their 3,000-year dominion had been challenged. They would not accept defeat lightly, and the next battle would be far more difficult than this one. Still, as he looked out at the stars that no longer seemed so hostile, Jake felt something he had never experienced before. For the first time since that encounter 3 years ago, humanity was no longer helpless. They had proven they could fight the galaxy's rulers and win. Now they would find out what happened when those rulers fought back with everything they had. Emperor Kethavar sat upon the crystal throne of Zephyria Prime, his black eyes burning with a rage that had not been seen in 3 millennia. The news brought by the surviving ships from the Sol system was impossible, unthinkable, yet undeniably true. A primitive species had not only resisted the might of the Zephyrian Empire, but had actually defeated one of their fleets. "Mobilize the Grand Armada," the Emperor commanded, his voice echoing through the vast throne chamber. "Every available ship, every warrior, every weapon in the Empire. The humans will learn the price of defying eternal rule." General Thexmore, commander of the Imperial forces, bowed deeply before speaking. "Your Excellence, such mobilization has not been necessary for over 1,000 years. Many of our fleets are scattered across the outer territories, maintaining order among the subject worlds." "Then bring them all back," Kethavar snarled. "Let the subject species see what happens when someone dares to challenge our authority. The destruction of humanity will serve as a lesson that will last another 3,000 years." Across the galaxy, the greatest military force ever assembled began to move toward human space. Thousands of ships, millions of warriors, weapons that had conquered entire civilizations, all focused on a single star system that had dared to say no to galactic dominance. But humanity was no longer hiding in their home system. Commander Ryan Kelly's forces had spent the months since their victory establishing forward bases in neighboring star systems, turning space itself into their battlefield. The humans had learned an important lesson. When fighting a superior force, never let them choose the ground, Captain. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance as it patrolled the outer edges of what was now being called the Human Defense Zone. His ship had become a symbol of human resistance, and aliens across the galaxy whispered its name in languages humans had never heard. The Defiance had been upgraded with new weapons and armor, based on captured Zephyrian technology, making it even more formidable than before. "Captain, we're receiving a coded transmission from Agent Santos," Lisa Grant reported from her station. "She's requesting immediate extraction from the Korath system." Jake nodded grimly. Maria Santos was one of their best covert operatives, working deep behind enemy lines to gather intelligence and make contact with other species oppressed by the Zephyrian Empire. If she needed emergency extraction, something important was happening. The rescue mission took them deep into alien territory, where the UES Defiance had to rely on stealth and speed rather than firepower. They found Maria's ship drifting powerless near a dead moon, apparently the victim of engine failure. But Jake knew better than to trust appearances in this war. "She's aboard, Captain," Ben Carter reported as the extraction team returned. "But she's brought passengers." Maria Santos entered the bridge accompanied by three beings unlike any humans had encountered before. They were smaller than Zephyrians, with blue-tinted skin and large eyes that held an intelligence sharpened by centuries of oppression. "Captain Morrison," Maria said, her voice tight with excitement. "Meet Ambassador Yelneth of the Korath Republic, or what's left of it. They have information that could change everything." Ambassador Yelneth stepped forward, their translator device rendering their speech into perfect English. "Captain Morrison, your species' victory over the Zephyrians has sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. For the first time in our memory, someone has proven that the Empire can be defeated." Jake studied the alien diplomat carefully. "What exactly are you proposing, Ambassador?" "Rebellion," Yelneth said simply. "My people have been slaves to the Zephyrian Empire for over 2,000 years. We are not alone. There are dozens of species, hundreds of worlds, all waiting for someone to show them that freedom is possible." Dr. Helen Price, who had been studying the captured Zephyrian technology, made a discovery that changed everything. Working with samples taken from the destroyed alien ships, her team uncovered the truth about the Empire's technological superiority. "The Zephyrians didn't develop their advanced technology," she announced during an emergency briefing. "They inherited it from another species they conquered long ago. They're essentially technological parasites, using weapons and ships they don't really understand." This revelation spread through human space like wildfire, and more importantly, it spread beyond human space to the oppressed worlds of the Zephyrian Empire. Agent Santos and her team worked tirelessly to establish contact with resistance groups on dozens of worlds, sharing both the truth about their oppressors and the technology needed to fight back. The war that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Instead of massive fleets meeting in open battle, the conflict became a web of guerrilla actions, sabotage missions, and liberation campaigns. Human forces, supported by growing numbers of alien allies, struck fast and disappeared before the cumbersome Zephyrian military could respond. General Frank Lopez coordinated the multi-species alliance from a mobile command center that never stayed in the same system for more than a few days. The veteran officer had fought in Earth's last planetary conflicts, and his expertise in asymmetric warfare proved invaluable against an enemy accustomed to conventional battles. "The key is to never fight them where they're strong," Frank explained to a gathering of human and alien commanders. "They have more ships, more weapons, more resources, but they don't have our mobility, our adaptability, or our motivation." The liberation of the Vaxen system became the model for future operations. Instead of attacking the heavily defended Zephyrian garrison directly, human forces made contact with the local resistance and provided them with weapons and tactical support. When the uprising began, the Zephyrians found themselves fighting not an external invasion, but their own subjects, armed with technology they couldn't counter. Commander Kelly's special operations teams perfected the art of deep strike missions, targeting Zephyrian supply lines and communication networks. The aliens' rigid command structure, which had served them well in their age of dominance, became a vulnerability when key nodes were eliminated by small teams of human commandos. The Zephyrian response was predictably brutal. Emperor Kethavar ordered the complete destruction of any world that showed signs of rebellion, turning entire planets into lifeless husks as examples to others. But instead of crushing resistance, these atrocities only fueled it further. News of the genocide spread through underground networks established by Maria Santos and her fellow agents. Species that had been content under Zephyrian rule began to question whether submission was truly safety. The Empire's own brutality became humanity's greatest recruiting tool. Captain Morrison found himself commanding not just a single ship but an entire task force of human and alien vessels working together against their common oppressor. The sight of former enemies fighting side by side filled him with hope he hadn't felt since the war began. "Captain, we're receiving reports from across the Outer Rim," Lisa announced during one of their raids on a Zephyrian supply convoy. 17 systems have declared independence in the last month alone. The Empire is losing control faster than they can respond." The turning point came when the hegemony of Tresh, one of the Empire's oldest and most loyal client species, openly declared rebellion. The Tresh had served the Zephyrians faithfully for over a millennium, providing technology and expertise that kept the Empire running. Their defection sent shockwaves through the Imperial hierarchy. Dr. Price's teams, now working with scientists from dozens of liberated worlds, made breakthrough after breakthrough in understanding and improving upon the ancient technology the Zephyrians had been hoarding. Each discovery was immediately shared among the Alliance, creating a feedback loop of innovation that left the stagnant empire further and further behind. Emperor Kethvar watched his 3,000-year dominion crumble from his crystal throne, unable to comprehend how primitive humans had managed to turn the entire galaxy against him. His generals brought him reports of defeat after defeat, of worlds lost and fleets destroyed by enemies who refused to fight by the established rules. "How many ships do we have left?" the Emperor asked his remaining advisors, his voice hollow with disbelief. "Perhaps a tenth of the Grand Armada, Your Excellence. Most of our forces are either destroyed or trapped defending systems under siege. The rebellion spreads faster than we can contain it." Kethvar rose from his throne, his ancient form trembling with rage and fear. For 3 millennia, the Zephyrian Empire had been eternal and unchanging. Now, in the span of a few short years, everything was collapsing around him. "Prepare the final assault," he commanded. "Gather every remaining ship, every loyal warrior. We will strike directly at Earth and end this madness at its source. If we cannot rule the galaxy, then we will ensure that no one else can either." The preparations for the Empire's last gamble began immediately. Every surviving Zephyrian ship converged on the Imperial capital, loading weapons of mass destruction that had not been used since the ancient conquest campaigns. Emperor Kethvar would personally lead this final assault, determined to take humanity down with him even if it meant the complete destruction of Earth itself. But across the galaxy, the freed worlds and their human allies were preparing as well, the Liberation fleet that assembled to defend. The final battle began at the edge of the Sol system, as sensors detected the approaching Zephyrian fleet. Emperor Kethvar led the last remnants of his once mighty empire in a desperate assault that would either restore his dominion or destroy everything he had ruled for 3,000 years. His flagship, the Immortal Wrath, bristled with weapons designed to crack planets and end civilizations. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, now the flagship of humanity's liberation fleet. Around him stretched the greatest armada ever assembled in this part of the galaxy. Ships from dozens of worlds flew together under a single banner of freedom, their crews united by their shared hatred of tyranny and their hope for a better future. "All stations report ready, Captain," Lisa Grant announced, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were about to face. "The Allied fleet is in position and awaiting your orders." Jake looked out at the stars that had once seemed so hostile and threatening. Now they were filled with friends and allies, beings from across the galaxy who had answered humanity's call to stand against oppression. "Signal to all ships. Today we don't just fight for Earth or humanity. We fight for the right of every species to choose their own destiny among the stars." Emperor Kethvar watched the defensive formation through the viewports of his command center, his black eyes burning with the fury of a ruler who had never known defeat until now. The sight of so many alien ships defending the primitive humans filled him with rage that went beyond rational thought. "They dare to protect our former subjects," he hissed to his remaining generals. "Species that we elevated from barbarism now turn their weapons against us. This insult will be answered with complete annihilation." The Emperor had armed his ships with the most terrible weapons in the Zephyrian arsenal, planet killers that could turn worlds into radioactive ash, viral bombs that could wipe out entire species, gravitational disruptors that could tear apart star systems themselves. If he could not rule the galaxy, he would ensure that no one else could either. Admiral Kate Hughes coordinated the defense from her command ship, the UES Guardian, hidden among the combined fleet. Her tactical display showed the approaching Zephyrian forces, fewer in number than the Liberation fleet but armed with weapons of unimaginable destructive power. "All ships, maintain formation," she broadcast to the Allied fleet. "Let them come to us. We know these weapons, we've studied them, and we know their weaknesses." Dr. Helen Price had spent the final weeks before the battle, perfecting humanity's ultimate weapon against Zephyrian technology. Working with scientists from the liberated worlds, she had developed a computer virus specifically designed to target the ancient systems that formed the backbone of the Empire's military might. "The virus will spread through their command networks faster than they can respond," she explained to Jake during the final briefing. "But we need to get close enough to introduce it to their systems, and that means someone has to board the Emperor's flagship. Lieutenant Colonel Steve Parker and his Marines had volunteered for what everyone knew was likely a suicide mission. Their assault shuttles were equipped with the most advanced stealth technology the Alliance could provide. But getting through the Zephyrian defensive screens would require skill, luck, and the kind of desperate courage that had carried humanity from their single world to the stars. The battle began with a thunderous exchange of fire that lit up the darkness of space. Zephyrian plasma cannons, weapons that had destroyed countless worlds, met the improved defenses of the Liberation fleet in a display of destructive power that could be seen from Earth itself. But the Allied ships had been designed and built with hard-won knowledge of Zephyrian capabilities. Their shields held against weapons that should have vaporized them, and their return fire found weaknesses in ancient armor that had never been properly upgraded or maintained. Emperor Kethavar watched in growing horror as his weapons failed to achieve the easy victory he had expected. These were the same planet-killing devices that had ended civilizations. Yet the enemy ships continued to fight with a determination that seemed to mock 3,000 years of galactic dominance. "How are they surviving our assault?" he demanded of his tactical officers. "These weapons have never failed before." The answer came as Jake Morrison led a squadron of human fighters in a daring attack run against the Emperor's flagship. The small craft dodged through defensive fire with an agility that the rigid Zephyrian combat doctrine couldn't counter, their pilots improvising and adapting faster than the enemy could respond. "All wings, focus fire on the shield generators," Jake commanded over the tactical network. "Once their defenses drop, Colonel Parker's team can get through." Steve Parker's assault shuttles used the chaos of the fighter attack to slip through the Immortal Wrath's defensive perimeter. His Marines had trained for this moment through hundreds of simulations, preparing to fight their way through a ship designed to be impregnable. The boarding action that followed was brutal and desperate. Zephyrian warriors, armed with weapons of incredible power, fought with the fury of beings who knew their empire was ending. But they had grown soft during their long dominion, relying on overwhelming technological superiority rather than tactical skill or individual courage. Steve's Marines moved through the alien corridors with the efficiency of predators, using every advantage their smaller size and superior training could provide. They had studied Zephyrian ship designs for years, turning the enemy's own architecture against them. Dr. Price's virus spread through the Zephyrian fleet like a plague, targeting the ancient computer systems that none of the current generation truly understood how to repair. Ships that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia suddenly found their weapons offline, their shields failing, their engines sputtering to a halt. The Emperor's final gambit came as his flagship's systems began failing around him. Rather than accept defeat, he activated the gravitational disruptor that could tear apart the entire Sol system, willing to destroy billions of lives rather than admit that his reign was over. But Jake Morrison and the crew of the UES Defiance had anticipated this desperate move. Racing through the battle debris, they positioned their ship directly between the Emperor's weapon and Earth, their enhanced shields configured to absorb and redirect the destructive energy. The gravitational pulse that should have shattered planets instead washed harmlessly over the Defiance's protective barriers, dissipating into space as proof that human ingenuity could overcome even the most terrible weapons of an ancient empire. Emperor Kethavar fell to his knees on the bridge of his dying flagship, watching through the viewports as the last ships of his fleet surrendered or fled into the depths of space. 3,000 years of absolute rule had ended in a matter of hours. Brought down by a species he had dismissed as primitive and insignificant, Steve Parker found the Emperor in his command center, surrounded by the bodies of his final guards and the wreckage of systems that had once controlled a galaxy. The ancient ruler looked up at the human Marine with eyes that held no anger anymore, only the hollow emptiness of total defeat. "It's over," Steve said simply. "Your empire is finished. But we're not like you. We don't destroy entire species just because we can. Surrender now, and your people will be treated fairly." The Emperor's death came not from human weapons but from his own hand, unable to live in a galaxy where his authority no longer meant anything. With his passing, the last organized resistance to the Liberation fleet collapsed, leaving the Allied forces in control of what had once been the most powerful empire in known space. President Amy Rodriguez addressed the galaxy from Earth, her words broadcast to every world that had been freed from Zephyrian rule. Today marks not the end of one empire and the beginning of another, but the birth of something new. A galactic community where every species has a voice, where cooperation replaces conquest, where the strong protect the weak instead of exploiting them. The Galactic Freedom Coalition that emerged from the ashes of the Zephyrian Empire embodied humanity's greatest achievement, not the destruction of their enemies, but the creation of something better to take its place. Species that had been enemies for centuries learned to work together, sharing technology and knowledge for the benefit of all. Jake Morrison, now promoted to Fleet Admiral of the Coalition Defense Force, established the principles that would guide the new galactic government. No species would be forced to join, but all would be protected from aggression. Technology would be shared freely rather than hoarded by the powerful. The mistakes of the past would not be repeated. The former Zephyrian worlds, freed from their ancient oppressors, began the long process of learning how to govern themselves. Some struggled with the concept of freedom after millennia of absolute rule, but human advisors and allied specialists helped them find their own paths to independence and prosperity. As Jake stood on the observation deck of his new flagship, looking out at stars that now held promise instead of threat, he reflected on how far humanity had come from that first terrifying encounter with High Regent Vextar. They had faced the galaxy's rulers and not only survived but proven that cooperation and determination could overcome any tyranny.